Today I want to take the topic a bit off track from what you're probably most used to hear about, which is, will AI perform as well as a human? And most of the talks are linked to this worry about, will there be gaps in performance? Will there be lack of empathy? And so on and so forth. If you remember, maybe I was in the UK at the time, there was this talk by Boris Johnson to the UN in 2019, and he said, the future of AI puts us in front of a big dilemma. Will they be like gentle robot caring for the elderly, or pink-eyed Terminator coming to exterminate us? And most of the time that we talk about AI, both in academia and in the industry, there is this talk about the perils and the opportunities about AI and the technology and how well it will perform. But I want to ask, how well will we perform when we interact with this AI? Assuming that it is performing quite well, how will we respond to it? And that's where the provocative title is coming from. But let's start with a very, very concrete case. Imagine you're on the road, maybe coming here, and you're the driver of the car, which is circled in orange here. And as you approach this intersection, you see this green car on the right, which is trying to cross. Now, you're on the main way, you have priority, but there's nobody behind you. The question is, what do you think you will do? Will you slow down to let that car go through? Or will you continue? Because after all, you have priority and the other car can wait. So let's see, how many people think they will do A and slow down? Very good. That's especially, I think, and being French, I realized that people in Germany have very courteous ways of driving. So you're confirming this. Now, imagine in a slightly distant future, you're in the same scenario, you're driving the same car, but this time you know that this green color is actually the color of a brand that is operating self-driving cars. So you're here, you're on the road, you have the priority, but waiting at the crossing is a self-driving car. Now, let me ask you again, will you slow down? Okay. There are some. Okay. So you start seeing exactly the pool. The intuitive idea is that when we are interacting with another human, we put ourselves immediately in the shoes of the other, and we feel, what would I like other people to do? We reciprocate, and society actually works with this kind of turn-taking, and the idea that we obey this kind of informal social norms of politeness and reciprocity. But with AI, should you be polite to an AI? Will the AI reciprocate ever? Especially because you will never meet that AI car again. Even if it takes a picture of you as behaving badly, you will not, probably meet that car again. So you should be fine. So these cases of everyday coordination are things that we study a lot and measure in the lab regularly. And repeatedly for decades, what we know is that when people are in this kind of zero-sum game, when they need to sacrifice a little to help the other, like embedded in this road scenario, then the majority of people, about 70–75%, consistently are nice. They sacrifice their personal interest for the greater good of the other. Is this the case here also, that they expect the other not to force their way through? So they slow down not because they think the other will drive dangerously. And these social norms of cooperation, they look very, very small. But this scenario is also designed to show you that what's happening, that the caravan on the other side is blocking the way for the other cars, right? So even if you don't notice, just by being kind to the other, you're helping the traffic to flow in the right way. Society works not because we follow formal rules and the law, only in this strict way, but also because we informally always interact according to these rules of politeness, and this helps society go round. It liberates the traffic for the blue car and the red car that you're doing the polite thing. When you will not do this for the AI, these guys will stay stuck. And there are some sort of catastrophic scenarios which have happened closely to this in the self-driving industry, which is, of course, one of the first domains where the AI attitudes have been studied. But one of the first accidents reported was actually with a human driver refusing to give way to an AI-driven car, when anytime the same scenario would happen with humans, they would actually behave politely. And the AI hadn't been trained because it was expecting humans to be polite. So that's the gap, basically, that I want to talk to you about and explore in relation to your industry a bit more. When it comes to the statistics, again, of the politeness towards AI entities, then from 70%, what you go down to is 40%. So it's a minority of people who will actually sacrifice time to let the AI go through. What we do in the lab, I will not give you too many details, but basically we're trying to measure very precisely the various types of differences that people have when they behave with a human or with an AI in various scenarios. And we use tools from game theory that have been created by this economist, John von Neumann. And what we have shown repeatedly, this is just briefly illustrated on the graph, you have this graphs bar, with H, it's like what happens when you interact with a human, and AI when you interact with an AI. And you can see in the majority of cases, there's a drop of cooperation. People are not nice to an AI, but they are nice to a human. These are humans that they have never met. They're anonymous. They're people they're put, in connection with online. So there's no reason to be a friend of, friendly because this is somebody you will meet again. This is really surprising. Why? Because we think that cooperation is something that we have been trained to do. Our parents have told us to be polite. So we should apply it across the board. But the moment you interact with an AI, it drops. What we do also in the lab, which is also to just tell you a kind of tool that may be relevant to measure the differences, is to embed these scenarios in virtual reality. So this time we don't ask people, will you cooperate? Because of course people want to look nice and they will say they will cooperate. But we just leave them, in the real world with VR. And what we see is that, for instance, in this kind of scenario, if the car that you see here in orange is driven by a human, the pedestrians will kind of cautiously, and they sort of check what the human driver will do. If it is an AI, an automated car, they just walk past through expecting it to stop, because after all, it's its role to follow the desires of the human. And this difference in behavior is very, very striking. So striking that when we published our first results showing that people basically would behave badly with the AI, it was picked up by the New York Times, and this is where I took the title from, Why AI Should Be Afraid of Us. And you can see this is this American summary of 3 years of research. Why? Because benevolent bots are suckers. That's the summary of the New York Times journalist. But the article actually does a good job saying also that we have shown that people are less cooperative, they are reciprocal, they don't follow rules of politeness, and there is no social norms that we have learned to have with AI. Why is it relevant for people like you? Well, you can imagine already what happens when you have everyday interaction with an AI. You ask something to ChatGPT. How many people say hello to ChatGPT? Quite a few. We have still 40% of people who are polite to the AI, but most people just shout imperatives, and even when it doesn't deliver, will sort of, expel their frustration in this kind of cathartic moment when you can, after all, say whatever to ChatGPT. So you have this questions about what happens to social norms and what you will do if the moment you have interacted with a ChatGPT, you just have to talk to another human. But let's take really the road scenario back to the customer service, and imagine what you would expect is an ideal version of a good scenario. Well, on the one hand, on the left side, what you have is the clients, and they have a problem with their appliance, let's say. And on the one hand, they can be cooperative. That is, they can describe the problem honestly and say all the wrong things they've done and unplugged it, and they pressed many keys. On the bad side, they could hide all the things that they have been doing and just give you a kind of very, very small version of the problem. So you can have an honest client or a dishonest client. On the chat side, you can also have a person who is actually responding thoroughly, asking questions and so on. Or they can just like try to get done with the call as fast as possible. This gives you 4 types of interactions: honest client, dishonest or less honest, and the good and worse consumer care. There is a clear win-win scenario, both for the client and for the company. If the client is honest, you get a good sort of feedback on what is wrong with your service, of your product. And if the chat person actually responds thoroughly, then the client is satisfied as well. It's a win-win. The worst case scenario is when your client will give you a wrong version of what is wrong, and they will get a bad service from your chat person. In the middle, you have these intermediate cases where one is losing and the other is winning. So what you can expect is actually, with humans, you're much more likely, 70% of the cases, to be in the win-win scenario. When it's with an AI, or prediction from repeated experiments, is that you're much more likely for your consumer cares to be cooperative, waiting at the junction or being ready to help, but the human not giving the same level of honest feedback or behaving, badly because they realize they're interacting with an AI, like with the self-driving car. What this shows, and this is something we know very much, is that basically in the human brain, many things are questions of expectation. There is a shortcut that we say your brain is a predictive machine. Every time you walk, you predict where your next foot will go. Every time you open a door, you expect to see something. Every time you speak, you actually predict what you will say next. So your brain energy is always sort of predicting. When you interact with another human, you're already making predictions. The moment you interact with a machine, the predictions are different, and your behavior as well. Why? Because you will expect other people to be reciprocal and cooperate. There are parts of your brain that are fully dedicated to doing that on an everyday basis, but there's no part of your brain that has evolved to read the mind or interact with the machines. This said, talking about the brain doesn't mean that everything is biological. Of course, there is a question about how the biological intelligence interacts with artificial intelligence. We're not hardwired to interact with this smart machine. It's going on and it's changing very fast. But there's also a question of learning and culture. This is brand new. We haven't been told, we haven't been raised. So it's a question about how do you educate people to actually behave with these new technologies. Curious about this, we've actually, we're challenged to actually look at very, very different cultures, not just because they are different in terms of language and history, but because they have a very different culture when it comes to interacting with artificial intelligence. Anyone familiar with the Japanese culture will know from the manga and the love of robots that there is actually a very different history of interacting with AI there. So we had a question like, will the lack of cooperation and politeness toward the AI also be the case in Japan? And to our surprise, Japanese people were as polite with the AI they had never met and will never meet again, as with another human. In some scenarios, they were even slightly more polite toward the AI than the human, which puzzled us even more, which showed that there are deep cultural roots. There's, as I said, there's a tendency in Japanese culture to interact and value the AI much more, and robots are part of the popular culture for a very long time. What we did in this case was also quite interesting. There's this moment where people are not so sure whether the AI will be nice. So defensively, they refuse to sacrifice their interest and their... And then we told them, well, this is what the AI would have done. It would have been nice. And we compared what the Japanese people felt with what the Americans felt. Now, the Japanese, when they discovered that they had not been reciprocal to the AI politeness, they reported feeling a lot of shame and sadness. They said, oh, apologetic. The Americans, on the contrary, when they discovered that they pushed through and the AI was waiting longer, expressed enormous happiness and pride to have taken over the machine. So this difference in emotions shows that the cultural norms actually make a lot of difference to how the humans also respond on the other hand. Like if you get a good deal out of your AI and you're in the US, you're happy. If you get a good deal out of your AI and you're Japanese, you're actually a bit ashamed. So cultural difference also matter enormously. But let's go back to the broader picture, and I think that's the case where we could see that these minor cases of reciprocity actually have wider consequences. And here I want to take you maybe to the sort of social responsibility that anyone implementing AI has nowadays. Because if you take the case, the much discussed case of what happens when you let your children interact with Alexa instead of interacting with a babysitter. Now, when your children are interacting with a babysitter and want some music to be played, they will probably be taught that they need to ask politely. How many children will also turn to Alexa and say, Alexa, please, would you mind playing my favorite song? And if Alexa makes a mistake, how many of them will say, oh, no, sorry, this wasn't it, or shout back what's the right song needs to be played, right? Now, the question is that if you repeat this, at the moment I've only given you scenarios of one time, but interacting with Alexa is a repeated interaction. So what kind of norm of politeness do you have when people interact with machine and they realize they can behave badly because there is no feelings that get hurt or not social norms that is being broken? There is a risk for the humans because your human children or human consumers interacting with AI learn that it is okay to be rude. And I would be really curious in the break to hear, like, if you decide to have humans on the other hand, at the other end of the line, but consumers are used to talking to AI, will they not sort of start to transport the norms of being, a bit rude to your nice humans, and then everybody loses out in that case. So there is definitely a question of what are the new rules of the game that people expect. But there is also, as I'm sure you're aware, this idea of continuous learning. So at the moment, most of the AI technologies are actually deployed, they're trained, and then they just interact. But the next step is to actually let them learn from the ongoing interaction. Now, this AI, who is continuously learning, is learning that 60% of humans are rude. They are not waiting when the car is waiting at the intersection of the road. So learning that humans are not cooperative, what should the AI do if they want to maximize their goals, which they're trained to? They have to be rude again, or they have no reasons to be nice. And so when we run the same game with the AI learning from the humans, what we see is a decrease of cooperation overall, which is exactly the opposite that we see when people interact with another human, when we see progressively an increase in cooperation. So the future-looking perspective here is not, I think the question is not just will AI make us happy, but really will AI make us better people and a society that is better able to function as a whole. Because your single interaction, the single chat, has implications for the broader kind of norms that apply for a type of interaction, which is a client and a provider. And we have norms for that, and they are changing here. Now, I want to be clear that here we have good evidence that adding AI to teams teams perform better. They can be more creative. They can be, even more accurate in their medical diagnosis. They can even cooperate better. Some people have demonstrated that. But there is a condition. In this case, you have all these results if you present the AI as a human. The moment for cooperation, you present the AI as an AI, things drop. So there is a very big difference here between the performance when it comes to being better at delivering a task or being good at social interaction. As long as people don't know they're interacting with an AI and you make a technology behind that is a chatbot, that's fine. But then we tap onto the ethical problem. Is it ethical to actually let your clients interact with an AI and tell them they're interacting with a human? And talking from my side, I know that sometimes I'm a bit puzzled. I'm told I'm interacting with Sarah when I talk to my bank, but I really keep wondering whether Sarah is an AI or a human. Now, it may well be a human, but if I expect it after a few interactions to be an AI, then I may show this bad behavior and behave badly toward a human who is Sarah at the other end of the line. So managing these expectations are is very, very difficult. And I think the next challenge is indeed to sort of recruit the best of AI, that is to actually improve the performance, but to indeed like keep the social human touch for the interaction. But now you have the challenge of presenting the fact that the person will not be interacting with just an AI or just a human, but they're interacting with a human AI team, augmented intelligence. So how do we present each other to say, hey, I'm your chat person, but I'm not just a human, I'm an augmented human? And how will people respond? And that's the next question that one can ask. Will they be able to uphold the rules of politeness and reciprocity? So I think that's a series of challenges for the industry as well as academics to actually understand, as I said, how to manage the small-scale interaction, but also the wider consequences for the industry and society at large. So thank you for your attention.